Well, how you doing? Mr. DJ is back tonight. Count down my fantasy playlist, and I appreciate you watching these videos as I count down my fantasy playlists. One of my many fantasy playlists. Started compiling these fantasy playlists in 1979, and still doing it to this day. This one, though, back in the 80s, the week of November 29th, 1986, and coming in at number 29, holding it from 29 the previous week, Howard Jones, originally from I think near Southampton, England. And he grew up in Wales, I believe, near Cardiff. But, well, he's from the UK. That's the bottom line. Howard Jones. You Know I Love You, Don't You? It's the name of the record by Howard Jones. I'll be honest with you, when I first heard this song, well, at the time, I wasn't too impressed with it. It lacked the originality of some of his earlier songs, like What Is Love is one of them back in the spring of 1984. New song really kicked. Had a great beat to it. That drum machine kicking in, I guess. Perhaps the Lynn drum machine. And there was his first really big American hit came in the spring of 1985, and I'm outsourcing one of my top 40 Bibles here. And things can only get better. That went to number 5 here in the States. New Song went to number 27. That was in the winter of 83 and 84. And then What Is Love went to number 38, I believe, maybe 33. That was in the spring of 84. And things can only get better in 85. And there was Life in One Day, the exotic calypso sounding record, another original sounding record by Howard Jones back in the summer of 1985. And then there's the slow record, No One Is to Blame, with some backing by Phil Collins in 1986. And then we get into You Know I Love You, Don't You? Which is from his third album called 1-2-1. I wasn't impressed with this record at the time. I thought this was just a basic meat and potatoes since 80s, I can't, basic meat and potatoes 80s record, synth driven 80s record. Just nothing really special, nondescript. I mean, it's a throwaway. The reason why this song was being played was because Howard Jones was a known quantity. And it wasn't anything for the FM station to say, hey, let's play this record because everybody knows who Howard Jones is. It's safe to play Howard Jones, and that's it. I want to make another comment. I've been reading some of the YouTube comments regarding the songs that came out in the 80s and 90s in comparison with today's music. And this video is being cut in 2015. People saying, well, people just don't, they can't sing these days. They don't have talent. I mean, the people back in the 80s and 90s, they had so much talent. They had so much soul. They had so much guts. And these people today, Ariana Grande, Miley Cyrus, they don't have any talent. They don't have nothing. Let's hold back on that for a minute. I'm gonna try to put things in perspective for you right now. In the 80s, and I lived through the 80s, I missed the 60s. I really missed it. I worked at a nightclub restaurant back in the 80s and played played the current music at the time, the Billy Oceans, the Whitney Houstons, cameos, Word Up. They were great songs, but when I came home, when I listened to my tape recorder, we're talking we're talking late 20th century technology. When I listened to my tape recorder, I listened to 60s music, early 70s. There was an oldies DJ. I remember him, Joe Donovan, the best oldies DJ I ever heard. He was on a radio station, WHAS from Louisville. I listened to him late at night. His odd and obscure hour, 50s, 60s, 70s. Forget about the 80s. And that's not all. I was being generous. Some of my older friends. Oh God, I remember one guy I talked to who graduated in the 60s. Sort of a friend of mine. We're sitting down talking about music because we talked about 60s music. But one day he came out and said, today's music, 80s music, Lance, it's just, I know there's some talented artists out there, but today's music is plastic. It just sounds plastic to me. And this was in 1988 when he said that to me. 1989, 1988. Paul McCartney. I remember something Paul McCartney, I'll never forget it. He said back in 1989 when he came out with a new album, he was about to go on tour. He came flat out and said, you know, today's music is synthetic. Talking about 80s music. We're talking, this was 1989. Today's music is just so synthetic. That's why everybody goes to the Rolling Stones concerts. That's why the Rolling Stones still pack out on their concerts. So just giving you some perspective. It's just this generational thing. My music is better than yours. And then it goes on again. My music is better than yours. And in the 60s, let's face it, how many 35 or 40-year-olds like Janis Joplin, huh? I don't think there was hardly anybody over 35 or 40 in the late 60s who liked rock and roll, particularly the hard stuff. The Beach Boys, the Four Seasons, they might tolerate. The Supremes, the Four Tops, they might tolerate. But note the word tolerate. Okay. Now let me step off my soapbox and let's get down to earth. The thing about this song by Howard Jones, though, I like it. It sounds good today. It sounds fresh. It has stood the test of time. Howard Jones won the leading synth artist back in the 80s, and his third album, I think I've already mentioned it, 1 to 1. Now, although I have to admit that at the time I might have been on to something about this record, not just not being anything special. It did not make top 40 in England. And Howard Jones was very popular in England, his home country. He had about 10 top 40 hits, I believe. It might have been more than that. 6 of them were top 10s in England. But this only got as high as number 43 in England. It did better over here in America. It went to number 17, but a lot of people have forgotten about this record. And I guess it is sort of a forgettable record, to be honest with you. But still, it sounds good. Got a great beat, got a great synth to it. I appreciate this record a lot more now than I did back then. That comes when you're older and wiser. Howard Jones, you know I love you, but guess who produced this record? We are talking a major legend he's produced so many groups and acts over the years. Arif Mardin produced this record. I just found that out. Arif Mardin of Atlantic Records. He was with Atlantic Records for years, 30 years, I think. He started in 1963, eventually became vice president in 1969. And he produced Good Lovin' by the Rascals, by the Young Rascals. He co-produced that with Tom Dowd and the group itself. He also produced The Wind Beneath My Wings by Bette Midler, Jive Talking by the Bee Gees, Pick Up the Pieces by the Average White Band, Separate Ways, I believe that's that song, Separate Ways, no, Against All Odds by Phil Collins, produced by Arif Mardin. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I could probably go the next 5 or 6 minutes going over all the records that he's produced over the years. I Feel For You by Shaka Khan. Remember that? Shaka Khan, the way the rap starts on that record, produced by Arif Mardin. Enough said. Howard Jones at number 29 with a once nondescript record sounding awfully good these days, 30 years later. You know I love you.